Hey everyone, and welcome back to another installment of the Virtual Advertising Student Advertising Federation's guest speaker series. And today, I'm very honored to be able to have a conversation with Bjorn, who's the Executive Creative Director of Ingo Stockholm, whose work is award-winning and includes the likes of the Swedish Number campaign and the Moldy Whopper campaign for Burger King that we'll get to learn more about today. But first off, Bjorn, thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, absolutely. So before we get into the work that has obviously been talked about around the country and the world, I'd like to take it all the way back to the beginning, if I can, and try to understand the beginning of your career and how you got to where you are now. And I'd like to start with the question of what exactly was it that made you consider a career in advertising?
Well, yeah, it's a difficult and complex question, I guess. But if I'm going to start from the beginning, when I was little, I had quite a bad stutter. So I started to write a lot to express myself and express what I was feeling. And so I did that throughout my childhood. So I was quite familiar with writing and expressing myself in that way. And then when I went to like higher schools, I quit. When I was 17, I wasn't ready, done with my education, but I quit. So I went out traveling, and then for a year, actually to America. Was one of the places that I went to. And then when I came back, I did some odd jobs for a while, or for a couple of years, and so on. And then I decided it's time to finish off that education that I started. So when I was doing that, I had a teacher who discovered that I was writing a lot, and she told me that there is something called advertising agencies, and you could actually get paid for writing. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is amazing. I never heard of it. And you have to remember, this is like back in the late 80s, 1980s. So I thought that sounded wonderful. So I looked into it, and then I decided to visit a couple of the agencies in my hometown, which was Gothenburg, on the west coast of Sweden. And one of the agencies actually gave me a job. And so I just came in from the street, basically, and I was offered a job. And the guy said, I'm not going to pay you anything, and then you can be here for 3 months. And if you're worth anything after 3 months, then you get a salary. And apparently, that's exactly what happened, because after 3 months he gave me a salary. And then but then I found out about this advertising school in Stockholm, which is still existing. It's called Bjrns, and they always get a lot of people applying for the education. And so I applied, and then I got accepted. And so after 6 months I quit that agency, and I moved up to Stockholm, and then I started the advertising school. And that's the basic story. I mean, it's the famous banana peel. I slipped in. Somebody said something, and then I slipped in, and here I am, still today. I mean, we're talking. I graduated from advertising school '89, so it's now 31 years ago. And I still think it's the best job you can have in the world.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's something we've seen a lot, and the fact that a lot of professionals seem to just stumble and find their way into advertising. And I think that makes the industry all the more creative and all the more interesting. So from where you started professionally to where you are now as an executive creative director, and as you said, there's 31 years between that. Can you take us kind of through an overview of your professional career from that point on to today?
Well, I've never had a general plan, or I never had a plan at all. I just been listening to my gut feeling. about things. And I remember the first agency I started to work for after advertising school. It wasn't really my type of place, and it didn't feel right to be there. So I quit after like less than a year, because yeah, basically I felt that I wasn't going to grow as a professional working for them. So then I got a job for another agency, which was much better connected to who I am and what type of advertising I wanted to do and stuff. So and then so I stayed there for I think 4 or 5 years, and then from then on it's been 2 agencies in my life, and the first one was first Low in Stockholm, and then I moved to Low in London, and then back to Stockholm. And then 16 years ago, I was hired by Ogilvy. So as you know, probably know, Ingo is part of Ogilvy. And so yeah, I've been there since. So I spent 11 years working for Low, and now 16 years working for Ogilvy. And I don't think I'm going to change this job for another one.
That sounds good. And so I think what we really would want to talk about today, when we have the chance to discuss with you, is some of the campaigns that you've worked on that have garnered international attention. And I think the first one, which I find very interesting, is the Swedish number campaign that you did for the Swedish tourism department. And so for those listening that don't understand, Sweden has its own national telephone number where you can call a Swede, and it'll connect you to any number of volunteers across the country that you can have a conversation with. And Ingo played a part in the development of that campaign. But for you, Bjorn, if you could tell us what kind of the main idea behind that process was in working on that campaign.
Well, the brief was something completely different. The brief we got from them was about food, Swedish food, and the Swedish cuisine. And so then we had like a big presentation. I had more or less all creatives on the agency working on that brief. And then we had a big presentation for the client. And there was one idea that wasn't at all on brief, and that was a telephone number. One telephone number that anybody from the outside could call into Sweden, and then the call was being answered by a random Swede, anybody basically in Sweden. And as soon as, I mean, everybody in that room realized that was a great idea from the beginning, even the client and so on. So and that's basically it. That's basically what we did. So we got Sweden had a telephone number. We don't have it anymore. It's been shut down for a few months. I think it was 4 years ago or something like that. And a hell of a lot of people from around the world called in and talked to random Swedes during the period when the number was open. Yeah, it got amazing attention in news medias, in TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, and so on, globally. And yeah, that was quite amazing. The whole campaign. It took us more than a year to make the campaign, and what not all people know is that we actually changed the client during the journey, because the original client was called Visit Sweden, which is like 100% government. And when we made the whole campaign and the app for the mobile phone and the switchboard, digital switchboard thing, which was then one of the world's largest, then Visit Sweden got cold feet, and they said, we do not want to participate in this campaign anymore. And we were like, what? I mean, we worked for you guys for a year. We had endless meetings with them. And I mean, we went through everything, all the panic scenarios that possibly could occur from launching a campaign like this. with loads of people from their organization, and then we were all ready to launch, and then they said, sorry guys, we are so what happened then is that we have another big organization here in Sweden, and they're semi-government, and they called the Swedish Tourist Association. So I called them up, and I said, hey, we have this great idea. All you have to do is push the button. And so they came over to the agency, and we presented the campaign to them. And in that meeting, in that room, they have a general secretary. They don't have a CEO like a normal company. They have a general secretary. He said, he said something funny. He said, I'll probably get some shit for this, but we'll do it, or something like that. So so they basically accepted, stepping in and taking over the campaign. And given the success of the whole campaign, I think that Visit Sweden, they were really regretful about their decision. And I knew things were happening within that organization. People who we met then when we worked with them, they left the organization after this. I mean, we are quite a small country, and it was huge in this country. Even the Prime Minister stepped in and answered the phone for an hour and so on. It was all over the news here, and it gave everybody in Sweden a sense of pride. And I think the rationale behind the idea is that we don't have any big landmarks like you guys in America. We don't have any Mount Rushmore or like you guys. We don't have an Empire State Building. We don't have the beaches that you have in California and in Miami and in the South. But we do have our people, and our people are immensely, especially when we go abroad, we are super proud of being from Sweden. And we talk a lot about, how it is living in this country and so on, especially when being abroad. So I think that was the whole rationale behind the idea and why it worked so well in this country.
Was there any issue with pitching the idea of a phone number that anyone could pick up? Was there any liability that the client was hesitant to take on that role?
You have to remember this was before GDPR, and so it didn't exist then. Yeah, but I was terrified when we launched. I mean, there's so many things that can go terribly wrong with launching a telephone number to a country that anybody could answer, and so I was terrified it was going to be misused in different ways. And I remember, like, on the launch day in the morning, I was super nervous that this was going to go straight south, and I was going to stand there being responsible for maybe shaming my whole country and things like that. But fortunately, it didn't happen. We had very, very few complaints about the people calling in. Basically, I think we had 22 complaints out of more like 200,000 calls or something like that. And basically the number was used the way it was supposed to be used. I took several calls myself, and I had wonderful conversations with people from all over the world. And they were all very curious about our country, and some were thinking of coming here, and what do I recommend them to do? I'm going to bring my two children over, and they are like 6 and 9, to Stockholm. What do you think I can do with them while I'm there, and so on and so on. And most of the calls were actually quite long. They were like 30 minutes or 40 minutes, something like that. I think the longest call we had, because like I said, it was before GDPR, so we could monitor everything. The longest call we had was more than 6 hours long during the campaign. And now afterwards, this was 2016, and afterwards now, I've seen many stories in social medias about people that came over visiting Sweden and visiting the people that they talked to on the phone during the campaign.
Well, I think that definitely shows the success of that campaign, and I want to talk about more about how you measured the success of this campaign, because I know you had international news outlets discussing it. U.S. President Obama mentioned it in a press conference. But what were the metrics you used to determine the success of that?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we wanted more people to come to Sweden, but that takes time. I mean, that's something you cannot measure from just launching a campaign. But Swedish Tourist Association is a members organization, so you actually become a member there. And so that was one of the metrics that we measured, the recruitment of new members, and also younger members, because their members were quite old, and they were getting older, so they wanted like younger members coming in, and that actually happened. And so from that perspective, it was also successful and so on. And then, I mean, not to forget, I mean, the campaign got more than 10 billion impressions. So it makes it one of the biggest campaigns in the world ever. That's amazing. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it was so easy for TV stations and radio stations to create content, original content by themselves. So, I mean, all they had to do is call a Swede and then have a conversation. And then they had a piece of original content that they could broadcast. So, yeah.
Well, absolutely. I think I've seen a few videos of U.S. news outlets calling in, and I think that's a good example of what you just discussed. So I think that's a great overview of a campaign that a lot of people might not be aware of, younger that you did. But I know what we're going to talk about next is something that everybody's aware of, and something that you've obviously been talking about a lot in the recent months, is the Moldy Whopper campaign that you helped do for Burger King. And so if you would want to take us through kind of the main idea was behind using a Moldy Whopper to convince people to switch to Burger King.
Well, yeah, we've been working with Burger King for like 2 years now, I think, and we mainly work with Burger King here in Scandinavia. So we have a client here, but we also work with global Burger King in Miami. So I'm in constant contact with Fernando Machado. Perhaps you know about him. He's the global CMO of Burger King. But so this started out approximately 1 year ago when we got a brief from Burger King here in Scandinavia about them removing all the artificial preservatives from their burgers. And I think Sweden were more or less the first, or Scandinavia were more or less the first part of the world who did that. So they gave us a brief, and they asked us to do something with the brief. And so we came up with a few different ideas, I think around 5, 6, or 7, or something like that. And we presented them to the guy here in Scandinavia. Ivo Sakowski is his name. And he liked them, and he told us to present them to Fernando Machado. So we had to fly to Miami, which you could do about a year ago. You can't do that today. But we flew into Miami, and we had a meeting with Fernando, and then we presented these different ideas that we had. And one of them was a moldy burger. Well, the Moldy Whopper, basically. And when Fernando saw it, he said, it's against every rule of food advertising. I love it. We have to do it. So yeah, that's the story behind that.
I think that's a good segue into my next question, is because it is against every rule of food advertising, and everybody knows that staging food and the process behind that Can you tell us the process of what it took to actually capture the process of the burger molding and creating the ad itself from that?
Yeah, I can. But first, I like to mention also. Fernando also said that in that meeting that David in Miami presented a similar idea about a year and a half earlier, but then Burger King, they were not ready with their products, so they couldn't take it on, and so he told me to, or asked me to cooperate with David in Miami on this idea. And since we are both Ogilvy and I know the guys there, and especially Pancho Cassis, I thought it was a great idea. So that's how the whole project started, kicked off, and that was like, I think September 2019. And then I thought it was easy. I'm always an optimist, and I mean, everything is solvable. So I thought it was like, and everybody else seemed to think that it's just about putting the burgers in a box and wait, and that's what we thought too. So we did that in the agency, and the result was terrible. The burgers, they imploded and they turned gray, and hair started to grow on them, and things like that. It was impossible to even think of using in a campaign. And as I said, we did this in the agency, so we had a terrible smell all over the agency during those trials. But then we contacted a production guy, and we got a hold of a little, you could say, a bit of a nerd to a photographer who became really interested in the whole process. So we moved the whole operation to a photo studio in Stockholm, and where we could better control the environments and stuff. And when we did that, then things basically started to happen.
So when you talk about controlling the environment, does that entail temperature? Were multiple burgers used in the process? Was it just one? Can you elaborate on that?
We had several burgers like growing at the same time with different start times and so on. I don't know how many burgers we had growing there during the time in the production, and most of them, like 99% of them, completely failed. And but with a few of them, we sort of got lucky, and we got what we needed for the campaign, basically.
That's very cool. And I think one of the best parts of the art itself is that it is almost disgustingly beautiful, and the fact that while the burger may be moldy, I think the art is in incredibly good taste. Was there anything special you guys did to capture those images as well as you were able to?
I said from the beginning that if we were to do this campaign, those photographs had to be the most beautiful shot mold ever done in the world ever, and that was the mantra we kept repeating. So I remember we got, like, not early, but after a while, we started to get like okay-ish looking burgers, but we realized that they were not good enough, so we just kept on going. And yeah, like I said, some of them turned out well, and that's it.
Well, you talk about partnering with David in Miami, and I believe Publicis is also credited on this as well. And when it comes to an international campaign like this, where for a global client like Burger King, can you describe the process of having to work in a partnership with other agencies?
Surprisingly good, I'd say. It was basically us and David who did the whole production, and then Publicis came in at the end. So and like I said, we know each other from beforehand, and you could think that maybe there would be a lot of prestige in between us and stuff like that. But it wasn't. So I mean, we were all very dedicated to do the best campaign ever, and that was it. That was the objective that everybody who worked on the campaign had. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, surprisingly well. I have only good things to say about it. And I think it's quite unique that agencies like this work in this way. I haven't really heard about it before, to be honest, and I'm glad we did it, and I think it made the campaign better than if we would have made it ourselves, for instance. And so if it happens again, I would be all for it. But there is also learning here that from that the thing I told you about the Swedish number, that I was like super nervous when we launched the Swedish number. I was also super nervous when we launched this campaign. I mean, I was more or less terrified that this would backlash in one way or another. And so I think, and all the time that we've done something that is really great and up on that level, I always felt the same nervousness. And I think that's probably what you should be looking for. If you're not nervous when you launch a campaign, then the idea is probably not great enough. So yeah, and I mean, yeah, the result of both these campaigns and other campaigns that we've made too. We made a few campaigns for Lidl. Perhaps you've seen them, the supermarket chain here in Sweden, and so on. So I think you need that extra nerve when you do your work. I think it's important.
Absolutely, and I think this campaign is famous in itself for the process and for the ambition of it, but I think it's even more famous for the discussion it got after launch. And yes. So were you aware of the possibility of this becoming such a talked about campaign?
I mean, I think we sort of thought that if we would do a really great job, that people will talk about this campaign, because it is, like Fernando Machado said, it's against every rule of food advertising. But I mean, you never know. You can only trust your gut that this is a great enough idea, and then you just have to launch and see. I think that most of the time when I trusted my gut, I've been right. I've not been terribly wrong, at least. So I think, yeah, that's yeah, it is. Yeah, you have to trust your gut and think. I mean, if you like the idea, and then the probability that other people will like it, it's, if you're talented, then it's probably a great idea.
Absolutely, and I think.
Having said that, I think that talent is a minor part of this work. I think hard work is the bigger part. So also all the campaigns that we've done at Ingo that became really successful, it's also the campaign that we worked hardest to produce. And it's the same. The same thing goes back. I mean, for my whole career, when I worked really hard on something, it became more successful. So I think, I mean, this job is about working really hard. And if you work really hard, then I think you can become successful.
It was clearly evident that a lot of hard work was put into the campaign, and I think that that was shown through how people talked about it. But I'm curious to see, since this was a global campaign and it reached all parts of Europe and in the States. I'm curious, was there a difference in perception from Scandinavian countries. As for those that may not know, Scandinavian countries have always seemed to be at the forefront of a lot of these adaptations, whether it be tariffs on sugar, and they're very more health conscious, it seems. And so with taking out these added preservatives and using a visual that can be as controversial as a Moldy Whopper, was a Scandinavian perception a little more positive than you might have gotten in other countries or other regions?
I don't think so. I think the overall perception of the campaign is more or less the same everywhere on the globe. I think, I mean, it's so surprising. I don't think anybody can expect a Moldy Whopper coming from a burger place. So it just took everybody by surprise. And I think people reacted the same way everywhere. I mean, we put quite a lot of media behind the campaign in Scandinavia, both on TV and outdoor, and I mean, newspapers and stuff like that. So it was quite a big campaign here, and a lot of people saw it, and it also affected sales for Burger King here in this country, and I mean, in a very positive way. It also affected the perception of the brand and the likability to visit the restaurants and so on. And so I mean, and that also makes me happy, because I mean, doing original creative work is like one part of the job. The work has to sell products as well. That's actually what we are there for. So I mean, if we win awards without selling products, then I think we failed. So I think it's very important that you have that in mind, and the Moldy Whopper is definitely successful, not only in Scandinavia but also on other markets where it ran, like in the States, for instance, and other places.
Absolutely. I think I saw a number of positive neutral sentiment at 88% and a double-digit increase in sales. So we can definitely say that obviously performed the duties that it was expected to do. And I think not only it did that, but it was also an award-winning creative campaign. You won a black pencil for PR from DNAD, which is one of its highest honors. And so were you aware that not only was the campaign going to be successful, but as award-winning as it was, on a personal note?
Again, I mean, when we started the production, I mean, we had a hunch that if we were successful in production, then that it would do well, not only for Burger King but also in awards. It's actually my second black pencil, since the Swedish number also won a black pencil. Yeah. So yeah, I'm very happy for that. I remember in the beginning of my career, I thought that if I ever could win a yellow pencil once, then I'd be happy and I retire. And that was like 15 years ago, something like that. And I mean, I could never dream of what happened now with 2 black and I think 8 or 10 yellow or something like that. And yeah. But I mean, it's the fun part of the job is to, I mean, that campaign is done now. It's behind us, and now we are all looking forward, and we are looking for the next great idea that would surprise people and do great for brands and so on. So, and I think that's been my driving force all the time. It's been, I mean, I'm never really dissatisfied, but I'm also never satisfied, and I think it's a big difference between those. So just to move on, think of the next idea that is around the corner, and then just keep on working. And like we said in the beginning, I've done this for a while now, and I still think it's the best job in the world, and I still love it. I still love every new brief that we get to see the opportunities and the possibilities, and hopefully do something great with it. And yeah.
When you talk about being neither dissatisfied or just satisfied, I think when we think of the major areas for advertising being New York or London or LA, does it motivate you to show that some really incredible and award-winning work can come out of a place like Stockholm?
That was a long time ago, where the big stuff came out of New York. It was like the 80s and the 90s. New York and London were like the big cities to do advertising. I mean, now, there are great ideas coming out of everywhere from on the planet, and you don't have to be located somewhere special. I think you need to have great people around you, and I think that's the most important thing. And then you need to be working with great clients that understands the value of creative advertising. And if you have that, it doesn't matter where in the world you are.
Well, I think that's a great overview of two of your obviously award-winning campaigns and things that have garnered international attention that we are very thankful that you talked about. But I'd like to just bring it back full circle and ask you just a few more questions regarding advertising, your career, and for all of us students that are just about to enter the industry. And so I'd like to start by asking, out of your career, your illustrious career, what would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, yeah, it's a difficult question. I think I have one observation that I've discovered or learned, partly from myself, but also from the creatives that I worked with. And that is more or less every time you, especially being a young creative, when you get a brief, then you read the brief, then you start to think it's going to be impossible to come up with something good on this brief. And that's like the starting point that a lot of people have. And then you sit there with your partner or by yourself, and then you think about it. And then after a while, you come up with an idea, and it's like, hey, I have an idea. I thought I'd never come up with any ideas on this brief, and here I have one. And then, oops, there is another one, and then there is a third one. And then you're sort of feeling content and happy with yourself because you've done something that you thought from the beginning wouldn't happen. And then I think a lot of people, they are happy, and they stop working there with like the third reasonable good idea. And that's actually when the real work starts, I think. Then you have to challenge that idea, and you have to challenge it again, and then you have to challenge it a third time, and come in from another angle. And I mean, and that's what I meant when I said hard work. This is where the hard work comes in. And yeah, and then when you decided upon an idea finally, then when you're moving into production, or even before that, when you are presenting it to client, you have to think about how you present it. What's the best way of selling this idea? And I think a lot of people cut corners in presenting their ideas. And I mean, me personally, I always rehearse my presentations. Sometimes I write speech scripts for myself, and then I rehearse them so I know exactly what to say. I'm prepared for questions from the client, and so on. And I think that's, I mean, it's ultra important. I mean, you've been working like maybe for a week or 2 weeks coming up with an idea, and then you meet the client, and then you go in, and then you just drop the idea on the table and then say, here it is. I mean, then you are not doing your idea justice. And I think it's super important that you plan the way you want to present, you're going to present the idea. And then when you move into production, I mean, this is where good stuff can become great, or great stuff can become good, or even worse than good. And I have a motto here that I've always told the creatives that I work with, and that is that it's never it's in Swedish, so I have to translate it. Something like, it's never too late for everything to completely fuck up. And it's the truth. When you move into production with a film, for instance, or something, I mean, the smallest little detail that isn't right destroys the whole project. And so, I mean, you have to be more or less paranoid about everything going on, guarding your project, and being on top of everything, and thinking what can happen, what can go wrong, and stuff like that. And so again, the hard work. This is the hard work also in this business. So I know I didn't completely answer your question, but I don't think nobody ever giving me like an advice that really stuck to me, apart from maybe then a long time ago, a guy at Lowe told me that, and yeah, he told me good is the enemy of great. And that has to do with what I was just talking about, that you give up too early on working on the ideas, and then with the ideas, and then into production. And I think the difference between good and great is about a millimeter. And I read somewhere that in tennis, the first ranked guy in tennis in the world, compare him to like guy who's ranked 500 or something like that. The difference in between them are like 3, 4, 5 points a game, and that's it. That's how close it is in tennis. And I think it's the same in this business. The difference between good and great is super small, and you have to work, do that extra mile, and make sure that if you have a great idea to start with, that it turns into a great idea in the end as well.
Absolutely. And so I'll end with this last question. As you talked about advice you received, there's an opportunity that if you have any advice that you would give to a student entering advertising in the modern age today, what would one piece of advice that you would give to somebody entering the agency or the industry itself be?
I think I mean, I would just say congratulations. You are moving into one of the best industries there is in the world. I mean, the way that the communication business has developed since I started is amazing. We have so many more buttons to press these days than we had when I started. So, I mean, the opportunities and the possibilities are like, they're immense. So, but if I would give one advice, it's just like be prepared to work really, really hard. And if you work hard, then you're prepared to give up stuff. And if you are and be super interested in the business, everything that is happening, and what's going on, then I think that more or less anybody can make it. It's like I said before, it's not about talent. Of course, talent is important, but it's more about hard work.
Well, Bjorn, thank you again for taking the time to talk with all of us here at the University of South Carolina. I know I speak for everybody when I say that it was an absolute pleasure to talk with you, learn from you, and just listen to what you have to say today. So thank you very much for participating in our programming this year.
Thank you very much, and good luck, everybody.